Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Veterans Club. We are great. We're having a great day here. We have an amazing guest, Ms. Lourdes Tiglao. She is an Air Force veteran and also the executive director for the VA Center for Women Veterans. Welcome, Lourdes. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here on a Saturday. Hopefully, folks who are out there are not receiving the rain or drizzle that we've got here in DC.
Yeah, too
Yes,
late,
no, I'm
Lourdes. Too late. We already have rain.
we are safe from the rain as of right now, but hi, we're looking forward for an amazing Saturday. I'm just gonna share the floor here to introduce our guest. Please, Kat and Lakeisha, if you just want to do a short intro to let our audience know who we have.
Oh, I'll go. Hi, everybody. I am Kat Corchado, also known as the freaking fabulous Kat Corchado. I am an Air Force veteran, retired. I'm also of the podcast Sisters in Service.
Lakeisha.
Yes, I am Lakeisha Mosley, and I am an Air Force and Army veteran. And definitely, I am the host of the Confused to Focus Talks with Lakeisha, focus on mental health and focus on self discovery of understanding yourself and how you can be brilliant where you are at the moment right now without any toxic information from the past lingering on with your present. That is what I am, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome. And I am your host, Anita, go by D. James. I am an Army veteran and a military spouse, and I am the CEO for Repatriate Our Patriots, a nonprofit organization that focuses in supporting veterans who have been deported and who we are working on repatriating. Thank you for joining us and welcome, Lourdes, again. It's just such an amazing experience to have a fellow veteran who is leading efforts in the VA for to address women healthcare needs. All four of us here today, we are all veterans, and we all know what challenges and what what women's health care at the VA means for us, right? So I'm going to open the floor for you to do an introduction, and yeah, we'll just get started.
Perfect. So, to everyone out there, good morning or slash afternoon, depending on what time zone you're at. My name is Lourdes Tiglao. I am the executive director for the Center for Women Veterans at VA. One of the things that I do as part of my role is to advise the secretary on anything under programs, legislations, initiatives that impact women veterans across the board. And the unique thing with my center is that because we sit under the Office of the Secretary, we're able to reach across the three agencies, whether it's Veterans Benefits, Veterans Healthcare, or the National Cemetery Administration. And that means we are able to continue to fulfill and to execute on the mission of our center, which is to advocate for equitable outcomes and access for women veterans for those VA benefits, services, and programs and opportunities that they have earned and deserve. And so, with that, let me turn it back over to you because I'm sure we're going to delve a little bit more into this, so I won't get ahead of my skis.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And I do want to hear a little bit about your background, right? You were in the Air Force, and I think we are all excited to hear about how you got started in this career.
So, some folks, if they see my bio on LinkedIn or my resume at some point, um, one part that they're not going to see is that I'm actually a first generation immigrant here in the United States. Came here from the Philippines when I was young, didn't speak the language. And so from the Philippines to Indiana, so there's that the first transition is about weather, never seen snow in my life. And so also within my family, in my immediate family, there was no one who ever served in the military. And so, in a lot of ways, I'm forging a lot of firsts within my family. And so, there's not necessarily a model that I was looking at. And one of the things that I will let the folks know here is that when I decided to go into the military, I'd already started college for like a couple of years, and I was a little bit impatient I think as most young folks would be. I was impatient to make a mark in the world in some way or to do something that I thought was more impactful than being a lawyer in Indiana. And no offense to any lawyers or Hoosiers, because I still call Indiana home. Um, but I wanted to do something more. I felt like there was something more that I could do in this world. And so that's how I ended up in the military. Now, granted, I was on a full ride on a scholarship. So when my dad found out he would not talk to me for at least 2 weeks, he was quite mad. And he thought that I was throwing my life away by going into the military. And again, like first person in my family to be going to the military. So the only thing that we know of is like, what we see like on TV or what have you. And so I can understand that as most parents, they just want to protect their children. And so when what you see is something that's negative, then you don't want your child to go there. But for me, one of the things that I wanted to do was one, just kind of grow my wings farther than Indiana, but also to really kind of experience the world. I think that's one thing that I was pretty hungry for, was to see how far I can go and how much of an impact I can make. So I'll say service was in my blood because I was also volunteering when I was in high school. So I guess it kind of started really early.
Lourdes, I have a two-part question. So I always ask this of veterans, and out of all the services you could go into, did you pick the Air Force or did the Air Force pick you? That's the first question.
Okay.
And the second question is, what kind of challenges did you meet while you were in the military, or maybe even some memorable moments, things that stand out for you during your career?
So I'll take that in a little bit of a chronological order because it's a little bit of I guess now I'd say a funny story. So I picked the Air Force, but probably not in the way others might always look at picking the service they're going to go into. I was looking at the four services, and I knew in my head it wasn't going to be the Army, and I knew it wasn't going to be the Marines, because at the time, what I could see was that they focused more on bronze than brains. So I'm like, well, I'm pretty short, and you can't see here, but I'm like 4'11" and little. So like, maybe that's not for me. And so I was like between the Navy and the Air Force. And not many folks know this, but I don't know how ASVAB is now. But at the time, the way I was making that decision was, who wanted a higher ASVAB score? They must be the smarter group. And so again, no offense to anyone in the other services. I love you all. However, this was my thinking back then. It was a very, I won't say rigorous, but it was methodical in my head. And so that's how I ended up with the Air Force. And then, so when you were talking about challenges, I'll say my first challenge actually came before I even got in, because again, short, I actually had to get a waiver to get into the military because I wasn't tall enough. And so the Air Force actually rejected me the first time, had to get a waiver. And then one of the things that I will say is that, so I went into the cardiopulmonary field. So any CCAT folks out there, any 4-H's, cardiopulmonary, shout out to you guys. It is probably one of the, if not the best, I think, career AFSCs that I can think of, because your sole job is to save lives. One of the things that I'll say from a challenge standpoint is when you're coming into a field that's fairly, male predominated at the time, came in the 90s, you always feel like you have to prove yourself. And you always feel like you can't show cracks in that armor. And you have to work harder. You have to be better than everyone in order to just prove your worth, that you belong there. And so as a young airman at the time, these were the things that were coming, going through in my head. And I'm being very transparent about that, because I'm sure that I'm not the only person who was thinking that, or maybe currently thinking that at this time. And so it takes years and experience to grow out of that. And sometimes you don't necessarily grow out of that totally, because you're going to be thrust in a different environment where you're still going through those doubts in your mind. But the one thing that I'll say is that through those doubts, through those various challenges, whatever those challenges might be, um, the important part is to, number one, trust in the training that's provided to you, because that is what allows you to be successful. And number two, always maintain the integrity and the core values that you have, because they're going to keep you on the straight and narrow. So whatever decision that you have to make, you'll always be able to sleep at night knowing that you made the best decision and the right decision for yourself, but also never compromising on your principles.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. It's funny you said you were picking between the Navy and the Air Force, because I almost went in the Navy because I saw their dress whites and I was like, yes. And my recruiter was like, you don't wear those very often, right? And then he showed me what they wore and I go, oh, no, we're not doing that. But also about proving yourself, because I came in as a single parent. And at that point in time, when I came in the early 80s, single parents were frowned upon. They were just like, oh, they're lazy, they're this, they don't do their job, they're always home with their sick child. So I had to overcome that. So thank you for answering those questions. That was great.
Of course.
And I'll just add, yes. So how we picked what service we went into, for me, I knew I will not be wearing those bell bottoms. I am 5'3", and that does not look good on me.
How do you think they look on someone who's tall? They were always shorter than the legs.
And then I said the Air Force, and the contrary to you, Lourdes, I was like, boy, I'm not smart enough for the Air Force. I can barely speak English, and I barely passed my ASVAB test because I couldn't understand what the questions were. So the Marines were not there. They were probably out coloring at, some place. You never know. But because I joined in Yuma, Arizona, the Marines was all I knew. And also my family had no military background. My sister was dating a Marine at the time, which she ended up marrying, right? So we do have a Marine in our family. Actually, two. My nephew joined the Marines later. But the Marines just weren't there. And that's, but the Army, they were ready to take me on, and they were willing to give me Germany as my first duty station. So on I went. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing your career. I think that's something that many can identify with, as well with your immigrant story. It's definitely a challenge, right? Coming in from a different country, your family doesn't really understand or know how the military works. And even until today, like my family, really, they asked me questions. And when I deployed to Iraq, I came home on a leave, and I had to explain, and like, this is a truck, this is a Humvee, this is what it means, right? So I really had to share a lot of that with them, but they loved it and they were very supportive, and the Army had provided so much to me and the opportunities. So I'm going to pass it over to our co-host here, Lakeisha Mosley, to take on the next questions, because she also has an amazing story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dee. One thing that I would like to ask you, just with everything that you're doing in your career, you actually went into the military. You were persevering. You said, listen, I got to be in here. I got to make this happen. I know that this is going to be a great plan for myself. How were you able to transition into the military once you get in, right? How were you able to function and make it your own? I would like to know that.
So this is a great question. I think that the first part that I didn't understand as well was the importance of mentorship. Like, I didn't even know that was really a thing. And so when you're trying to make your way, I mean, I came from Indiana. I spent almost 2 years in Texas, just going through my basic training in technical school. So half my enlistment was already over before I even started. And so finding someone who takes interest in your growth, sees something in you when you are a young airman or a young military person, is extremely important. Because I remember one of the things, I had quite a few, a myriad of, and a roller coaster of different experiences in the military. But I remember one of my early experiences after I got into my first duty station was someone within my career field felt that I don't belong there. And so they were looking for every opportunity to like figure out like how can we figure out like, how is she going to fail. And so one of the things that really helped me, because at that time I was actually thinking maybe the military isn't for me, I'm just going to finish my first stint and then get out. However, when that one person, it was a senior enlisted leader who approached me and took the time to take interest in my growth and mentored me through, giving me opportunities to shine, to prove myself under a safe environment because it's kind of under his wing. It changed my mind. And so I was like, I really love the Air Force. Can we extend for 2 more years? And so I ended up from a 4 year to a 6 year. And then that became basically that career, the career path that I've taken. And the transition from figuring out whether military life is even for me really starts with knowing that there's people out there who will support you, because that will make or break whether you even stay in. And then the other part that I was going to say is that the we talk about mental transition usually in the context of someone getting out of the military, but not always the transition and getting into the military. And so there's a lot of things that I didn't appreciate when I was still a civilian, until I went in. The things that I took for granted, being able to just go to the bathroom whenever I wanted. And so I think having the wherewithal that these freedoms that we enjoy can easily be taken away. And so the mental transition is really important to recognize very early on. The other point, and I didn't talk about this with regard to challenges, is that in my one of my consequential deployments. So when 9/11 happened, I was deployed 3 weeks after that. And one of the things, remember, I was an immigrant, so I actually wasn't even a citizen when I joined the military. So when I joined, I was like, there's a high likelihood I don't come back. So let me just apply for my citizenship to make sure that if I do die, I'm at least a citizen of the country I'm dying for. And so I come back from that deployment the next year, and I had a rejection for my application. And they said that I was being rejected because I missed my Department of Justice interview. But I was missing it because I was deployed. And so one of the things that, I was a little temperamental, more temperamental at the time. I was younger. So I picked up the phone to INS. I was stationed at Wright Pat. I picked up the phone for INS and I said, what's this telegram? Why are you rejecting me? I was like, well, ma'am, these are the policies and the rules. You missed your DOJ interview, so we can't do anything about it. And I continued to ask for someone who was in charge. When they wouldn't let me have that, I hung up the phone and drove over to the INS building and asked for someone to speak to someone who could do something. And I finally, after 15 minutes of going back and forth, finally had someone bring me to their office. And they tried to explain to me again that, I'm sorry, these are their policies. We can't do anything about that. Like if you've heard this, like raise your hand. And so what I told them was that the only time I'm going to, number one, apply again. And number two, give you them more money, which is several $100s. For an enlisted person, that's a lot of money. Is that if they took my role out there under deployment, getting shot at, and I'll take their job over there in the office. So fast forward 2 weeks later, I'm getting my citizenship and getting sworn in. Now I say this because in the context of not just transition, in the context of looking at the challenges that we face, no matter what challenge it is. One of the things that we have to make sure that we're developing is the fortitude, as well as the grit to stand up for what's right and have the voice to stand up for that. Um, many service women and women veterans feel like they cannot speak or that they are silenced, go along to get along, especially when you're in the career field that you're outnumbered by our male counterparts. Um, it's very easy to have your voice silenced. It's very easy to just say, I just want to protect my career. But sometimes you have to be that voice to ensure that others who come after you don't experience and don't face those same challenges that you're having. And number two, like when you know that it's right, when you know that from from an ethics standpoint, like this is what is right, we have the obligation to make sure that we are speaking up. And so when we're talking about transition, when we're talking about getting our benefits and services after we get out of the military, it is about making sure that our voice is heard, but in a constructive way. I was less constructive at the time. I'm a better now.
No, this is great. I really appreciate you for going a deep dive and explaining to us, because we need to hear that. A lot of times our voices are silenced, and we need to understand that no, we need to continue on moving forward and having our voice in wherever we are in the world. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for this question.
Yeah, and Kat, go ahead.
Oh no, I just had a question for Lourdes. Is that
Sure.
when we start to get out of the military, and this is probably going into segment 2, so let me know, Dee, if I'm ahead of schedule.
No, we're here for organic conversation. We have a segment, but yeah,
Okay.
this conversation is going amazing, and
Okay.
I really enjoying the conversation.
Awesome. So Lourdes, when we start to get out of the military, as women, we might be in charge of millions of dollars worth of people, assets, etc.
Mhm.
And then we get out of the military. And I was one of those people that thought, I have this in the bag, 20 years of experience, people throwing money at me, contracts, all this other stuff.
Mhm.
But what I have found is that it's not harder for us as women when we transition, it's different.
Mhm.
And how did you get your feet firmly on the ground? What kind of things
Uh,
did you put in place? Or did you just all of a
uh,
sudden be like, oh, here I am? And how did you know that you were there?
so no, it's always a question of whether you're actually there, right? It's a journey. Um,
We're always transitioning. I still feel like I'm transitioning.
But well, let me backtrack first before we talk about that to when we even make that decision to transition. There's a lot of alliteration in there, but one of the things that was really pivotal in my experience was one of my deployments over to Afghanistan, where we were responding to a kinetic environment, and there was actually an Afghan person that we had to stabilize, and again, it was like height of the conflict, and so there was a lot of going back and forth of should we, shouldn't we. They're the enemy, they're not, but I mean, this person was actually a civilian, and so just kudos to our CCAT team and our medical team at the forward deployed base, because we looked at that person as they are a casualty, they are not the combatant. And so we did go ahead and stabilize that person. And it was at that point, I think, that I made the resolve that I'm going to try and become a physician. It was, I think, the point where I thought there is no nobler career than to try to just save lives in whatever fashion that might be. And so when I made that decision, I said, okay, I love the military, but I keep getting deployed. So that's not going to happen with me trying to go to school. So I did finish my undergrad while I was in the military and then decided to get out. And when I went ahead and went to start my transition, you're asking about like, how did I prepare? I thought, because I was in the medical field, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I had it. Like, I will have everything copied because I don't always trust all the electronics. They say that they'll have it, but they might not. So I just made copies of everything. And one thing that I've learned is that through the transition process, they might try to talk to you or go through the tactical aspect, but they don't always go through the psychological and mental transition. In fact, I know that they didn't when I was getting out. And so, and whose responsibility is that? I would say that that probably starts, with yourself, of knowing when you're ready or maybe not ready, of doing our own due diligence, of seeking information first. And so even when I got out, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do this. Um, I, I will get through this. I don't need any help. And I'm saying this for a reason. So I knew about VA, didn't know too much, but I knew about VA, but I didn't try to get, whatever, all the benefits and services right away. I was thinking, I'm going to do this on my own. I can do this. I'm smart. I can, go through this. And fast forward, like several months later, I depleted all of my savings because I was stubborn. Again, temperamental, stubborn, dumb. Um, I depleted all my savings, and I landed in California when I got out. My last duty station was Okinawa. Landed over in California. I was trying to get my state medical licensure to be able to practice, and one of the things that I didn't realize was it's not going to happen overnight. It took 6 months. And so during that 6 months, I was depleting all of my savings just waiting for this and not being able to get a job because I didn't have my licensure. And so I ended up going, and I'll be, very transparent in my journey. I ended up going on unemployment, which I thought, I am a failure from having to go through unemployment. But I had to do that for a few months in order to just keep me afloat so that I can get the licensure so that I can start working. And I'm sure that I'm not the only veteran or transitioning veteran that's had to face that or went through that. But I think that it's really important to be transparent that for those people that you're seeing who looks like they've got it all together, all of that wisdom is born from the back of failures, perceived failures, stumbles, roadblocks, because you don't learn if you're not uncomfortable. You don't learn and you don't grow if you don't face any failures. And so these are the things that has taught me to be humble, to know that I can ask for help and there is no shame in that. And so I say this because in the context of any transitioning servicewomen or women veterans that are out there who are struggling, the VA is here to support you in whatever that journey might look like. You decide what it is your goal and your outcome is, but we are here to be your trusted resource along the way.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lourdes. And I couldn't help but to link what you share with us right now to when you shared initially about the mentorship, right? The power of mentorship, and that how somebody could become a mentor that can guide you along the way. I do believe in that there are, as once as we transition out of the military, we experience those challenges, and then we can mentor somebody else who's leaving the military as well, right? For me, it took me 10 years to even file my VA claim. And I only did so because I worked for a nonprofit who I was hosting Wounded Warriors, telling them, apply for your benefits. You have to apply for the VA. Yet I didn't even have my own,
Yeah.
right? Why? I was
Mhm.
also stubborn. I was proud. Everybody else needed it more than I did. And I was good, right? I couldn't see anything wrong physically with me, so I was like, I have two legs, two arms, I'm good, right? But what I was not seeing, it was the invisible injuries that I had,
Mhm.
that nobody prepared me for. When I left the military very rushed.
Mhm.
Actually, my exit in the military was a life-saving decision that I made. I felt that if I went back to Iraq, I was not coming back. And as I transitioned, I just completely disconnected. But I wish I'd had a mentor, or that I had listened to a conversation like this, right? To where there's women that look like me, that have gone through some of the things that I'm experiencing, and that reassured me that it's okay, I can ask for help, I'm not the only one. I think that is something that we often find when we are going through something. We think that we're the only ones, like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Right. And like, it's only happening to me. And like, come to find out, you enter the room and it's a room full of others who are also thinking the same way. Right. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's very important. I'm sure Kat and Lakeisha have also experienced something similar to that. Kat, Lakeisha, you have something?
Yes, absolutely. I have something I would like to know, just in when we're talking about how we're able to transition out, of our cells where we're located. How are you able to share with all of us, and actually in skills that you have in the transition as a woman from the military into the marketplace? I would like to hear some amazing skills, how we can manifest that for
Wow.
ourselves.
Okay. So this is I really like talking about this because there are transferable skills that's very obvious, right? So I was in military medicine. Obviously, I can just find my counterpart role in the hospital and say, that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be the same skill set, same licensures. That's the easy part. That's like a superficial transferable skill. And no, no disrespect to everyone, but that's like an easy one to go through. Um, However, the harder part is when you have been doing a certain thing for so many years and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I am tired. And I'll liken this to maybe I remember doing a stint. It's still in the medical, but doing hospice care. Um, and it's I have a lot of respect for those who work in that space because it takes a lot of energy and emotion to stay in that field. I figured out that I couldn't do it, and it was affecting me greatly. So I got out of that quickly. So when I'm talking about transferable skill, it's more about, number one, what is it that made you good at what you do? It's not about, yes, I know how to be a respiratory therapist, and yes, I know how to manipulate ventilators and intubate someone. That's not it. That's the culmination of a lot of other skills that allowed you to be good at what you do. And so I'll make the example of one of my friends who reached out to me asking for advice on something similar to this. They were a sniper, and like, I don't want to be a police, and the only job I can get is be in police or be in some kind of law enforcement to do the thing that I'm doing now, but I don't know how to do anything else. And I had that same conversation of, you know you weren't born being a sniper. You had to develop the skill sets that culminated in you becoming a good sniper. And so it is, the patience, the ability to measure in your head the wind patterns. It is, so you're probably good at math. And so being able to understand timing. So it's taking all of the soft, smaller skills and translating that into something that is translatable into another sector. I'll use myself for an example. My entire career in the military was in medicine. I am doing nothing connected to medicine right now. I'm running I'm running the Center for Women Veterans, which has, I'm not in the clinical side. I understand it, so that's helpful. Um, but that's not my bread and butter now. My role that I'm doing is looking at the larger picture. How do these various different problem sets that women veterans face as unique challenges? How do I bring them all together to maybe create something that is new, that is helpful? And so that comes from the culmination of being exposed to a variety of people. Number one, when you're in medicine, you have I did both critical care in the adult and critical care in the neonatal sector, so little tiny babies. So I was exposed to a wide variety of people, parents who are very upset or very worried. And so that taught me patience and being able to be a little bit of a chameleon when it comes to speaking to various audiences, knowing how to read my audience and adjust depending on what is needed at the time to get to the outcome, which is especially for our neonatal NICU parents, to get them to be in a calm state so that they will hear what we're saying. And so these are the soft skill sets that's not necessarily medical, but it's people. And so for my friend who was a Marine, it was getting him to see beyond the superficial side of it. But what are the little skills that he brings that made him good at what he does? And so for anyone who's listening out there, take stock in whatever job it is that you did. You were not born into that job. You took many skills, many little steps to become great at what you are doing. And so those are the same little steps that you can transfer: patience, people skills, being able to read the room, being great at math, me, not so great at math. So, like, all of these things are transferable. And once you start seeing it from that standpoint, not the end result, but those little things that make you good at what you do, then you're going to start seeing, like, well, I can apply this to this job. I can apply this to this job. And so in my career, for anyone who would see, like, whatever my LinkedIn profile, you'll see that I came from military medicine to the disaster response sector, from disaster response to tech, from tech to government. And so being able to cross all of these various sectors isn't because I had some single linear line of my work. It was the ability to understand what parts of me I could translate into these different sectors and that helps me be successful.
Yes, Lourdes, thank you so much for answering that. I love how you began to tell us how you built all of that together to actually get to where you are together today. Because if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be who you are today. And to understand that and appreciate that as a woman in the military. And I always say, it's so funny in the civilian world, I always say, read the room. It's important for us to be able to read the room, to be able to connect with each other moving forward in that. So I just wanted to say that. So I appreciate this, Lourdes. Thank you so much for answering that question. Mm-hmm.
Lourdes, I have a question for you. I think you had mentioned this before about women self-identifying. And so I wanted to ask some of the current challenges that you see for women veterans. And I think we all have stories, but I think one of the hardest things is being recognized as a woman veteran. Like, people don't see us, and sometimes in our own families or even in some VAs. If I walk in with my husband, that it's assumed that he is the veteran, and not just, and nothing against military spouses. I would say I'm a military spouse because I've been one too. But when you've served, what are you seeing? Are you seeing still some of these things that when women come in, what kind of challenges did you see when you first started in your job, and what are you seeing now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, there's over 2 million women veterans around the world. So not all of our women veterans live here in the United States. Many of them actually live in the territories, in different countries, especially as you talked about women veterans who are also military spouses. Some of them are still, a spouse of someone who's still on active duty, which means they might actually go and go to another location that is outside of the country. And so they're a little bit more isolated from VA resources. And so once you start kind of pulling them away from a community that can support them, they start losing that sense of identity. Because then that I like here's the one thing that is sometimes a challenge. I'd say a lot of times a challenge, I think. Folks, like society in general, likes to put us in boxes that they understand. And it's hard for us when society keeps bashing down on our heads that you are this person or you are this identity. But what we are trying to really emphasize and to really ingrain to our women veterans is that you can be both and. You do not have to lose your veteran identity because you are a spouse. You don't have to lose your veteran identity because you are a mother. You can be both and you can be all of it. And that is the beauty of us as human beings. But part of the onus is on society. And I always like to say that the veteran community, the military, is a microcosm of our society. The idea of women veterans and service women not being acknowledged for its services and sacrifices and their contributions in the same way is a reflection of how society looks at us. Like if I just do an exercise for everyone, if you close your eyes and you say the word veteran, what's the first thing that you think of? What's the first thing that comes to your head? And I'd say probably 8 times out of 10, you're going to see a guy.
Say a Rambo.
Yep, exactly. And part of that is because, again, society, entertainment, like how many war or military history documentaries do you see or movies do you see that is about women? Not many. G.I. Jane. It's about, I think, the first one that comes to my head. And so part of the problem is society not recognizing. It's not just our veteran community, it's society that keeps repeating that stereotype. And so what I will ask is for any of the folks here who are listening, who are watching, who are part of our communities, who love someone who is a military person or a veteran, please do your part to make the assumption that the woman's actually the veteran. It is easier to say for them to say like, "Oh no, actually I'm not," versus them having to again try to prove or try to emphasize that they are the veteran and that they belong there. In its isolation alone, when you're having to say, well, no, I'm actually the veteran, in its isolation alone, it might seem like it's innocuous. Something some might, I've heard this before. It's like you're just being sensitive. But you multiply this 1,000, 10,000 times in the same person's, in that same person. When everyone in society and in the community keeps saying, well, you're not the veteran because I'm not like seeing you as that person. Now that individual, that woman veteran starts doubting their value. They start doubting their identity. Because if everyone's telling you that you're not, then maybe I'm the one that's wrong. And so again, the onus is on our society, our community to make sure that we are making the assumption that the woman is the veteran versus the other way around, because it's harder to go back the other way. I hope I answered a question. I don't know if I missed something.
No, you did. It was great, and thank you for bringing up the fact that there are a lot of women out there who are dual. They are a military veteran and a spouse. But I also think that it's up to us to educate people.
Of course,
and for us to reach out and say, why don't I see women veterans on the screen at football games or at certain places?
Absolutely.
I'm like, what is wrong with you guys?
Actually, one of the things that I was going to say is that, and this is a great example of society not seeing the contributions of women just in general with the same parity and seriousness as our male counterparts. And this is a good popcorn question. I think we've got folks in the audience, right? How many airports do you know that are named after women? Just name like numbers. You got 0.
I think I don't none.
I guess
don't
like
know.
a 0. Okay.
I think we just no.
Yeah. So 1.5 out of all the airports that we have in this entire nation, 1.5. There might be another one, I don't know, but it's definitely less than a handful. However, how many can you name that are named after men? I'd say at least 10 that I can think of. Um, and so, because it's so much easier for us, even here in this audience right now, it's so much easier for us to say, like, oh, there's these various airports is named after men. It is a reflection. And it's certainly not because women haven't contributed to aviation in any meaningful way. All you have to do is watch Hidden Heroes. Um, it's not because women veterans didn't bleed for our nation. It's not because we were less patriotic. It's certainly not because we didn't do enough. But it is because society, our community, still has a little bit ways to go to recognize the sacrifices and the contributions of women veterans, of women in general in our nation.
That's so poignant of what you said, and you said it so well. And I wanted to ask, is there a story that you could share where the Center for Women Veterans helped a woman and stepped in to help her and empower her?
Okay.
Or are there too many of those?
There's quite a few. There's quite a few. My team is absolutely amazing. So we have this a system is called, well, so if anyone is in need of, any women veterans in need of help, 00W at va.gov. But there's also this system is called Ask VA or AVA, and we get a lot of inquiries through there too. One of the things though that I think I'll highlight is we had a woman veteran who sent us a very angry note about how VA isn't doing anything, and she's not able to get any care. And it was just a very, very long but very angry note about how we are not doing anything for her. And so at first blush, you'll think like all the things that they listed is what is the issue. However, I know that when I actually reached out, and I actually do some of the calls when they're forwarded to me, when I reached out directly, the thing that she didn't put in there was that she was on the verge of potentially being evicted. And that's the part she didn't say. She was just angry at everything. And so when I finally got to the potential root of where all of that pressure is coming from, I said, we can help with the rest of these things. But I said, the first thing I think that I want to make sure is, number one, do you have a place, a safe place to stay? Because if not, and how long? And because if not, I need to get you connected to our homeless prevention office. And so I did, and I made the connection, and I left it to the experts to do the rest of that work before addressing the rest of the issues that she raised. And then several days later, I got another note from her that just thanked us for seeing beyond the anger and realizing that there's something else underlying that anger that was pressuring her to lash out. So I don't know if I'd say like life changing, but I'd say that one of the great things that our center does is being able to perceive beyond some of the heightened emotions.
I would say that's life-saving, what you did. And for you to be able to have that whatever that was, to say, okay, she's not mad at us, she's mad about this. And reaching out, because a lot of people would have just said, I'm not talking to her. But you saw something else. So thank you for that.
And I will say, Lourdes, that you saw beyond that angry message, right? You saw the human being, which in my experience, is what I so in my so I go to the Richmond VA, and they have now an amazing a center for women's healthcare, right? And before, we were a little bitty corner at the main entrance to the left where you went in, and we weren't even in the main building. We were like right before the main building, and it had like 3 offices, right? And that already on its own feel like we haven't even made it inside the building, right? To have our own healthcare. Now I have to go there, and then everybody's seeing me going into through the main entrance, right? Everybody's seeing me going through the women's healthcare, and then hope to get to, after that appointment, make it into the main healthcare center. So that alone, right, was feeding into, personally speaking, it was feeding into me having to prove myself again, right? Even after the military, right? Now I have to not even go through the main entrance, go to this little office on the left, see if I can make it, right? Let me prove that I have injuries that I incurred during my combat service, and let me see if they believe me, right? First of all, it took me 10 years to file. Now I got to go and prove myself, right? So when I saw that they were building the women's healthcare center, and like how amazing it is, the doctors, the nurses, the entire staff at the center was so welcoming, and it was validation, right? We often say, well, you shouldn't need validation, you serve too, blah blah blah. Yeah, but I don't have any visible injuries, and
Right.
that has been such a hurdle, at least for me. I have a service dog, right? And people look at me at the airports and in buildings like, what's wrong with her, right? Is she in just
Yeah.
a example, I booked a flight, and when I got to the airport, I called an Uber, and I like to let them know, because not every state, but in California I know they do have Uber Pet, right? But for the regular Ubers, right, I like to let them know that I have a service dog. And so I messaged the Uber driver and I said, hey, I have a service dog. And I say that because I've been left by the Uber, drove up, saw me and my dog, and kept
Yeah.
driving. Right. And so I tell them, right, I have a service dog. And the response from the Uber driver was, are you deaf or blind? Right. And I'm like, okay, so I guess those are the only 2 people that could have a service dog, right? But that goes back to like our society, like the education side of it. And like my husband and I both serve, and every time when we go to Lowe's, military discount, right? And my husband, they tell my husband, oh, thank you for your service, sir. And he says, well, she also served, right? And then I say, I was like, it's fine, babe, it's fine, right? So we kind of have this tendency to self-oppress and not want to brag about things. We feel like we're bragging when we speak about our service, and we feel like if we want to be saying it's me too, it's just too much, right? So
Yeah.
we internally have to get over that ourselves so that we can begin educating our community.
I actually love what you said with regard to how your husband also supports you, because the onus isn't just on us. We can't just be speaking in an echo chamber. We need our allies because they are also in the rooms where we are not. And so it is not just up to us, but also up to those who are our allies to reinforce that. It's, it's funny because, for us, when we say, oh, it's fine. Like, I think if that happened to our male counterparts, the reaction might be a little bit different. And I think that there's a lot of things that sometimes happen that we say, oh, it's fine and it's okay. Again, it goes back to that whole go along to get along. Whereas if you maybe called a guy and said, oh, Miss so and so, they will be absolutely probably miffed that they're being misgendered. But for us, it's like, oh, it's fine. It's, we tamp it down. And again, these are the things that our society has ingrained in us before we ever went into the military. And it just kind of propagates in. And so now that we are much more aware about these not only the disparities, but also we're aware of, the education that needs to happen across society and within our veteran communities. And it's up to us to make sure that not only do we raise up when something is wrong, but also that we are finding our allies who will help us.
Yes,
Sometimes
and
it's about
that,
the messenger.
yeah, and that brings me back to like a meme that I saw on Instagram that says, be around those who speak about you when you're not in the room. Those are your allies, the
Yeah.
ones that lift you up when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
Those are your allies. So absolutely. And this brings me to the next question, right? What is your vision like for the for Women Veterans? I know like what you've shared with us today, it's been how your culture brought you to want to help, and like how you became and navigated that your journey along here. But and now that you find yourself in the Center for Women Veterans, I'm gonna say I'm just a huge fan of it because it was so impactful for me personally that having to go into a male clinic and being looked at by Vietnam veterans who are there, right? Like just it was so much, and now
Mhm.
it's just such empowering. What is your vision?
Yeah, well, number one, I want to make sure that I'm giving credit where credit is due. The Office of Women's Health in the Veterans Health Administration has been the powerhouse and the engine behind all of the women's health clinics. So all the women. So number one, I'll make sure that everyone knows every VA medical center has a women's health specific provider, whether they have a women's health clinic or not. But then number two, the Office of Women's Health is the one within the Veterans Health Administration that is really the engine and provides the guidance for those women's health clinics, the Women Veterans Program Managers, which, by the way, every VA medical center has one. Um, and so I think one of the things that I'll highlight is that the Center for Women Veterans, our job and our work isn't to be the thing that is outside, that is doing the things in the hospital or in the regional office. Our role is from a technical and advisory and an information and advocacy standpoint. So I said earlier that our mission is to cater for equitable outcomes and access, and that manifests in a variety of different ways. So part of it is an outreach. We are going to a variety of conferences, forums. One of the things that I challenged our team is to make sure that we are giving the same gravity and seriousness to small town forums and congregations as we do for large scale conferences. Because how do we build trust in our women veterans if they see that we're only going to these large scale things where there's a lot of publicity? We have to build trust and meet women veterans where they're at. And that means taking the time to go to these smaller towns. That means supporting these small events, whether it's only 20 of them, um, to show that we value them as much as these large scale events. My vision for where the center goes is really to continue this growth. We were not in this type of we did not have this same stance when I first came on board. Um, I really tried to push the center to lean into the advocacy, the outreach, and leaning into policy of making sure that we, as a Center for Women Veterans, have a seat at the table where some of these decisions are being made. And so, one thing that I'm really proud of is with VA, we have this governance structure called the IDEA Council, which is on inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And one of the things that we have there is that we have a vote for the decisions that's made by the agency. And so I'm sure many women can probably understand that when you are not at the table, you are sometimes the menu. And so when we are thinking about, there's a saying that I've heard, nothing about us without us. And I believe it's in the LGBTQ community that I've heard this. And so making sure that if someone is making a decision about your population, your sub constituents, make sure that there is someone that represents that voice, because otherwise, how can we expect them to know what the issues and the challenges are when there is no one that represents that voice?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really think that is very on point from what we are hearing and seeing today. Right? I really So last month, I went to say the Women's Veterans Museum in DC, the memorial, right?
Mhm.
Did an amazing. I love what Miss Phyllis is doing there. Like she is definitely
It's great.
highlighting women's service and doing as much as possible, right, to put us in the map. I will
Mhm.
say, like, she wants to make sure that what we know about now today, like you said, is like now it's our responsibility to amplify it, right? You
Yes.
can't say, I didn't know. You
Yes.
can't say, well, I've never heard of that. Well, now you've heard it, you've seen it. Now you have a responsibility, you have a duty to
Mhm.
amplify it, right? In whatever platform you have. And so, right now, and in closing, right, what advice would you give a woman or women veteran, right, and women in general who are seeking healthcare that is guided and directed to women um, in the veteran and military sector and
Mhm.
outside?
So, a couple of things. So I'll take this in two parts. So, one, just the advice that I would give someone in healthcare, seeking healthcare, but then I'm going to widen the aperture and I'll just say one thing that I'll ask women veterans in general, and service women. So, for anyone who's seeking healthcare, and can be anyone, not just women veterans, know that you always have a second opinion. You can always have a second opinion. For those who don't know that you can ask for a second opinion, now you know. That is a right that you have. Um, Number two, if you do not feel like there is a rapport or trust with your provider, find another provider. Why do I say this? Because if you do not have trust with the person who is trying to prescribe to you whatever it is, a regimen, a prescription, or some kind of therapy, you're less likely to follow because you don't have that trust that that person has your best interest. And they probably do, but if you don't feel it, it's really hard to just be readily compliant for this. Um, so, one, always entitled to a second opinion. Two, make sure that you have a good rapport and trust with your provider, because that is one of the few people in your life that you will divulge everything and anything to. Where you don't, like, when you have to do your mammogram or you do whatever it is, like, you are literally revealing your whole self to that person. So there has to be trust between you and your provider. Um, and then number three, if you do not find if you find that you are not getting the care that you need, or you are not getting the service, or you don't feel like you are being listened to or respected, there are various avenues within the VA healthcare system. Number one, the Women Veteran Program Manager. Every VA medical center has one. Number two, patient advocates. Every VA medical center has one. If none of those work, elevate it up to the VA medical center leadership. If that doesn't work, 00W at va.gov, reach out to us. We can untangle whatever it is that you are finding yourself that you can't get past through. Now, I'm going to go out a little bit on the aperture to what would I ask, or what would I advise any women veteran? You talked a bit about, like being able to share the story, the Military Women's Memorial, amazing. So I'll talk about three different areas where women veterans and service women can share their stories. Military Women's Memorial, the first one that you talked about. Library of Congress, the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. That is the place where there's over 100,000 stories about women and only 8,000-ish of them. Or sorry, there's over 100,000 of veterans. About 8,000-ish are of women veterans. And we know there's over 2 million. So please, please, if you're listening, please put your story in the Veterans History Project. It will be there in perpetuity. the website on the Library of Congress. You'll be able to like find your stories in there, and it's not only to tell your story, but also for others to learn of your walk, your challenges, that moment in time when you were serving. And it also serves to be inspiration for those young ladies, young girls, to learn about what they can aspire to. It is hard to envision what you can be in the future when you don't see a model that's in front of you. And part of that modeling is about those stories being told. The last thing that I'll say is within the National Cemetery Administration and VA, we have the Veterans Legacy Memorial. Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to be dead to be able to put your things in there. You can actually start while you're living to start you don't have to put your own epitaph or whatever, but just you can talk about your story in there of your service. And then in the Veterans Legacy Memorial, family members, friends can put like tributes or whatever, or talk about stories that they have of you, and so that it is a living legacy of your service, and it will be there in perpetuity as well. So those are the things that, like the smaller level, the healthcare side, but then at a larger level to ensure that our society, our community hears and sees and normalizes that women are part of our military, that women veterans are part of our community.
Thank you so much. And I knew about the Women's Memorial, but I did not know about the other two. And now that I know, I have no excuse on why not to share this, all of my platforms and social medias. That is amazing. I think that our future generations, right, will learn a lot from the experiences that we have gone through, and it will only help enrich our history. I do want to go around the room and just ask my co-hosts here to share a takeaway from this conversation. That's been amazing. We really, really thank you so much for sharing and being transparent and just vulnerable. I can't say that word.
Vulnerable.
Vulnerable. There you go. See, my Spanglish is in the way. It's like my translator in my brain has not woken up fully. So, Lakeisha, share a takeaway from this conversation today, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Definitely one thing that I can take away is that as women, we can actually persevere and transition out of our military life, and we can go into the workforce, then empowering ourselves and actually speak our voice and actually understand that we have a voice to speak on whatever platform we're in, and how we can actually take anything that was in our experience in our past, and we can translate it into empowerment. And then we actually show it to others that we can always achieve our goals. We can take the mental health in the aspect of a positive front and actually begin to build and begin to take anything that we have experienced in our adversities, but we can actually translate it into positive front. And that's one thing that I can always speak on, because for me, I want to be able to build, even as a woman. Maybe I'll be in the minority right now, but I believe I can be in the majority as I continue to persevere moving forward. So I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Kat?
Lourdes, thank you for being here on a Saturday and taking your time with us. I think my takeaway from today is we still have a lot of work to do. And not only for those that came before us, but for us now and those that are going to come after us. And I think as women veterans, or even as we need to reach back to some of these women that are still active duty military and say, hey, we're over here. When you need help, we're here. Because you don't know that you need that help until you're like falling down that that well going, what just happened? So Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your wisdom. And maybe we'll have you back and talk about some more stuff, because I think we can keep this conversation going.
I would be happy to.
I have loved that. And for my takeaway is it's really, I feel that is that we have an ally within the system that we belong to, right? But we also have an ally in our community. We have an ally for all of us women, right? That not just to like who we are today, but who we aspire to be. To know that there is even after I was a truck driver. There's no way I didn't want to come out here and be a truck driver or be a gunner. I was also a 50 cal gunner in the Army. I was like, that's not a transferable job. But what you said, how you was able to recognize and see that you were not born a doctor or a medic, right? I was not born a truck driver and I was not born a gunner, despite what my mom says, I swear. Right. So for that, just knowing that we have an ally and that there's really an entire group, right, an office that is there to advocate and that are doing an amazing job. They're really, you can see their work being delivered every day across the VAs. Just thank you so much for that. And to our listeners, I just want to remind everybody about our after show. We're gonna have it here on LinkedIn and it's audio only so that we can continue a conversation and just get to talk directly with our guests, with Lourdes here. If you have any questions, this is a very intimate but open environment, so we invite you to that. And please follow the Veterans Club on LinkedIn and our podcast. This show is being recorded and it's going to be available to hear on any podcast app you have, Spotify being one of them. Thank you to our partners at Parade Deck who amplify the message and the audios from military and veterans organizations. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the after show.
Great.